MicroStation has a facility which places what are called points in a design. Perhaps the most significant use of points is as permanent markers. While tools such as AccuDraw can duplicate the action of some of the point tools, these are typically one-shot operations because they leave no trace of their action. On the other hand, placing a point as a monument point provides a permanent marker that can be used whenever needed. And the tools in the Points toolbox provide various means of placing points in your design. The first concept to discuss is the choice of an active point. This is simply the type of point that is currently set for placement in the design. And there are three types. The simplest way to discuss these is to look at the Place Point tool, where we can see the different types of points. The Point tool, called Place Active Point, is on the Linear toolbox. I'm going to open this as a toolbox for convenience again. Here's the point tool. So click on that, start it. And if we look at the tool settings window, we can see that the point type is element, or character, or cell. And those are the only three types of points available. Now, an element is technically a line element that has a 0 length. Now that may seem very odd, having a 0 length for a line, but you'll see how this works in a second. In practice, that 0 length line will display as a small dot in the view. If the active weight setting is set to 0, the point will be almost invisible. To improve its visibility, you can increase the weight of the 0 line before placement. The character point type is simply a single text character, which is used as the point. And the third type is a cell, where you can assign a cell to be used as the active point. You have to make sure, of course, that the cell is assigned as a point cell in the cell's setting box. And again, we'll look at this later. The scale and rotation of the cell are controlled by the current settings for the Place Active Cell, since in effect you're placing a cell. Now, one important point here is that you can turn off the printing of points, which is controlled in the Print Attributes settings, which is quite useful because you don't always want to see points in a design. Let's start by entering an element point in the design. And I have the current weight set at 4, which will give us a reasonably large line size. The tool is ready. Simply data point. And there's our point. If we zoom into the point, which I'm doing right now, the point size simply remains the same. And this, of course, is because it is a 0 length. And the display is actually a screen pixel size, which has no relation to a zoom factor at all. This is different from the character and the cell points. They can be zoomed. Just try the same thing with a 0 line weight to see the difference. Here's my point. You can zoom in to separate them in terms of viewing, but the point size remains the same. Now, it may be that the smaller point is fine, but typically you want to use a higher line weight for the points to be visible. Now let's try a character point. Point tool again. Change the element to character. I already have a C in place. We'll use that. Now I must zoom out at this point, and we see the character here. Left click to place that. And that character is now a point. Even though it looks like text, it actually isn't really. It's a point. I can change the character, of course, simply by editing the character in the tool settings window. Let's use an X this time and place the X point character. Now, the physical size of these characters is controlled by the text styles settings. And right now I have settings of 6-inch height and width, since I'm working in English units at the moment. But you can set whatever values you wish. Let's try a cell point. Now you notice the cell point type is grayed out, meaning that we can't select it right now. And that's because we don't have a cell actually set in the tool settings window. So we'll cancel that and click on the little magnifying glass icon, which will take us to the cell dialog box. We could do the same thing by going to element and cell. In the cell box, I can see my previous cell library, but I'm going to open a new file, and I'm going to use the stlesson.cell, simply because there's only one cell in that cell library, which makes things convenient. This cell is deciduous, or decid, and I must, of course, select point to be sure that my decid cell is actually in place. I can now dismiss that. Here's my cell now coming in as a point. I can data point and right-click, and there's my cell point in place. Now, having placed some points in the view, it's interesting to see how you would snap a line to these points. Let's start the line tool and look at the snapping options that we have available. Right now, my active snap is key point, so we'll use that to start with. And we'll start with the element point, snap to that, pull away, zoom in, and we see that we're snapped to that actual point, which makes sense because it's a zero length point. So AccuDraw is finding either endpoints or midpoints, which are effectively at the same locations on the zero length line. Now, things are a little different when we look at the characters. If I want to draw a line to the character point, then as I move in with my snap, notice that the snap point displays. So if I snap to that point and draw my line, I'm snapping to what might or might not be the center of the point itself. Let's try snapping to the X character. Again, key point is running. There's the snap point. Snap to that, pull away, and zoom in. Now you notice, of course, that it's not the intersection of the two character lines. And in fact, what we're seeing here in both of these characters is actual snapping to the origin of the character itself, not necessarily the center. Now keep this in mind, and we move over to the cell point, and let's do the same thing. Notice that none of these supposed elements in the cell are available for a snap until I move to the center, where I do find a snap point, and I'll snap to that and pull away, and I'll zoom in. And notice that, again, the snap point is not at the center of the actual cell itself. So what's happening here is that with the cell and the character points, the snap point is actually the origin of the cell. If I change my snap to origin, make that permanent, and let's just change colors here so we can see a little better. Let's try this again. So now I'm looking for the origin, and now I can choose anywhere on the cell to select the origin, accept it, and drag, and look closer, and we see that we've snapped to the origin again, as did the line. Same thing will happen with the character, and we'll do the same with this one. Now these are both origins, so origin and key point are the same, and origin and key point are the same in that case too. So you do have to be a little careful with the snap points on the characters and the cell points. Now typically, if you are making a monument point in a drawing, you would create your own cell, and you will precisely control the origin of that cell, since that would be the actual monument point, with the elements around the point simply providing a visual reference for the actual monument. This method also allows you to use either an origin snap or the key point snap. So please practice and place some points of your own. Try all three types. And then the next video we'll look at the tools that will place and edit points.